Today, Wednesday, May 16th, is known as Brendan's Day. Hello, this is Rev Brad Kenney. And as I shared in an earlier podcast, from time to time, I'm going to introduce you to some of the men and women who have captivated my imagination throughout the years coming out of the Celtic Christian tradition. Brendan, also known as Brendan the Navigator, was one of the most beloved saints in Celtic tradition because he was a bit of an explorer. There are many stories about his adventures at sea. Many of the stories, often shared in prose, describe a strong tugging that this saint felt on his heart, and the different ways he went about exploring the vision and call he felt from God. Now with Brendan, as is often the case with saints of old, there are many stories, some of which are so fantastic, so amazing, that it's a struggle to believe these days. And it leaves many wondering, could this really have happened? Truthfully, sometimes the way that the stories of Brendan have been handed down, sometimes the words are describing an interior vision that Brendan saw or dreamed, and sometimes there's an actual experience or an encounter that's being told. But Brendan's life and his vision, his calling, powerfully speaks to us today, I think, in that in this life that God calls us to, God calls us on this adventure. God calls us often into uncertainty and into the unknown. And often when God does that, He does something within our hearts where there's this stirring or this unsettling, a time when it comes for us to sit up and pay attention. A friend asked me the other day, he said, "How have you been doing?" His question was in reference to our decision to leave the church a few years ago. In doing so, we walked away from the certainty of a paycheck. We walked away from things like health insurance and retirement. And we walked into this unknown world of fundraising and this challenge of being a missionary here in the U.S. Part of our leaving safety and security came as a result of God stirring something within the heart of me and my wife. So I wonder, have you ever noticed God stirring something in your heart? For me, there's always seemed to be a bit of a rhythm. Every 4 or 5 years, there seems to be a moment or an event where God wakes up something within my heart and soul. As I look back over years and years of journals, there have been several awakening moments. And when we first encounter Brendan, his heart has been wakened. His friends all know it. They see some distant glimmer in his eye. They see a restlessness in his spirit. I'm not sure exactly what it was that they saw, but Brendan doesn't just set out. No, instead, he goes up on a mountaintop to pray. I remember nearly 10 years ago, I was over in the UK at a conference with several of the EPL chaplains, and there was a stirring that I was feeling inside my heart, inside my soul. And I remember going atop a mountain in Wales, if you could call it a mountain, compared to the Rocky Mountains where I live, and I went atop this mountain to pray. And I know that God had started doing something on that trip. Well, it would be nearly a year later, almost to the day, that I would make my last rounds as a hospice chaplain and transition to a pastoral position within the church. In a similar way, it was a number of years later that while I was at the church, I felt God stirring yet again. Well, Brendan, when he goes atop the mountain to pray, it reminds us of Jesus, whom often, before a big moment in his life and ministry, we would find him up on a mountaintop praying. You know, one of the moments he prayed was before he picked the disciples. Another of those moments was before the dark and painful road to the cross. And sometimes we see Jesus on top of the mountain asking for wisdom. Sometimes we see him asking for strength. Perhaps you sense a stirring in your heart. Or maybe you could look back on your life and you could see moments in which you felt God was maybe calling you to something different, something new, something unknown. Maybe even right now, God's getting ready to move you. Maybe God's calling you to something new, something that's totally radically different than what you ever thought or imagined. Maybe it's some land or place unexplored or unfamiliar. Maybe you need to find a mountaintop to pray on. Well, to kind of close this today, I wanted to read to you part of Brendan's mountaintop prayer. This is taken from Celtic Daily Prayer, page 179. Shall I abandon the comforts and benefits of my home, seeking the island of promise our fathers knew long ago? Sail on the face of the deep where no riches or fame, or weapons protect you, and nobody honors your name? Shall I take leave of my friends and my beautiful native land? Tears in my eyes as my knees mark my final prayer in the sand. King of the mysteries, will you set watch over me? Christ of the mysteries, can I trust you on the sea? Christ of the heavens and Christ of the ravenous ocean wave, I will hold fast to my course through the dangers I must brave. King of the mysteries, angels will watch over me. Christ of the mysteries, when I trust you on the sea. Brendan's example speaks to each of us. Have I the courage to leave the familiar and journey into the unknown? To journey beyond the way I have prayed, the life I have lived, the sensible and the secure? To trust God to take me beyond these familiar shores? Christ of the mysteries, can I trust you on the sea? Christ of the mysteries, can I trust you on the sea? Well, God's calling may not be as great and grand as crossing an ocean, but maybe He's placed a vision in your heart and mind that feels tremendous or uncertain. If I go back to the question my friend asked me, how have you been doing? Well, if I'm honest, it's not been easy. I can perhaps more easily relate with the prayer of the Breton fisherman, which says, Dear God, be good to me. The sea is so wide and my boat is so small. There have been many, many moments in the last 3 years when the sea feels so big. The waves feel overwhelming and it feels like land or like safety is so far away. But as Brendan prayer says, I will endeavor in as much as possible to hold fast to my course through the dangers I must brave. If you feel the stirring of God, I encourage you to get on top of a mountain. Get quiet. Get alone. Get with God. Remove the distractions. Turn off the cell phone. Shut the TV, the internet down, and just pray. And maybe your prayer has no words. Maybe your prayer looks like a simple walk or a quiet meal. Maybe you go with a special person, a special friend, maybe a spouse or partner. Let that time be special. Let that time be a time of dedication and orientation toward being open and receptive to the possibilities that God may have in store for you. Let that mountaintop prayer be one that lets you see not just your vision of your life, but God's vision for your life. This is Rev, coming to you from the Touchline.